Welcome to a new YouTube channel which I'm dedicating to a life outlook I call floating above. What this entails is a little bit hard to explain at first, but I think you'll catch on as I catch on, because I'm still developing this. What I've been realizing over the past few decades really is that a lot of life is concerned with things that other people feed us that aren't necessarily true. A lot of people have a lot of agendas, especially people with power who want to hang on to that power or increase it. And they seem to run a lot of things that affect our thinking. Everything from ads on TV, shows on TV, print media, and of course the schools. And if you do kind of what they say in that movie, Jerry Maguire, follow the money, only in my case I say follow the power. Who's getting power based on you believing or swallowing a certain idea? You start to see a pattern. Now at first, when I was recognizing this pattern, it troubled me a lot. Because what do? Even if you realize you're being spoon-fed a lot of BS, what can you do about it? These things go very deeply. The people that run our currency in this country, the people that run the banking, all the kinds of business or interaction that you want to do, from owning a house, renting an apartment, buying a car, dating, almost everything is influenced, if not controlled, by what appears to be a relatively small group of people or several groups that have a similar agenda. For instance, I don't think the newspapers specifically work for these people. It just so happens that in order to increase their circulation, which increases their ad revenue, which they think is going to increase the quality of their life, they have to play along with those in power. Doesn't matter what country you're talking about. But after a while you start realizing that, I call it the WWE Syndrome. A lot of these people really seem to be adversaries, but they're no more adversaries than the wrestlers that you see on TV. They rail and scream at each other and break chairs over each other's heads. But when the lights go out, if you're alert, you can tell they're out having a beer and enjoying life together. They're really not on separate sides. And I started to realize that in politics it's pretty much the same way. That these people aren't really enemies because they've decided to share the power anyway. If you're talking in this country, Republican and Democrat, they're not really on opposite sides. They're on the same side. We're on the opposite side. Because if we figure out what they're doing, which is basically taking stuff from us, their game is over. And they don't want it to be over because then they have to work for a living, like we do. So there are a lot of ways to react to this. Everything from anger to despair to a kind of rebellious nature. The problem is, I don't think you can fight these people. With the military, the IRS, a lot of spies, and even fellow citizens on their side, what do? It's like me, one of the things I don't like is those red left arrows on a clear, straight street. They shouldn't be controlling my left turn. I should be able to turn whenever it's clear. If the light's green, straight ahead, and there's nobody coming toward me, I should be able to make that left turn. Well, I started getting in kind of the habit of going anyway if it was clear, especially late at night. And I got caught enough times, basically 3 times, $500 tickets here in California, that I thought, that's not the way to deal with it. I started to understand some things about some other ways of thinking, the Tao, Zen, and that led me to Gandhi's philosophy, which was adopted by Martin Luther King, for instance, and some others. I think Henry Thoreau was another one that adopted similar thinking. And what that means is, one aspect of that is to change the world, change yourself. Now that can be taken a few ways, but the way I take it is, you can't really change the world, but you can change your way of reacting to it, and you can change how much and how deeply you interact with it. There's some biblical references to this too. I can't think of the actual references right now, but what they basically say is to not be of the world, to live in the world but not be of the world. That's another good way of thinking. Another quotation that I took to heart was by Wolfgang Goethe, and he said, "None are so hopelessly enslaved as those who falsely believe they're free." I sure see a lot of those. I'm corresponding with them almost every day on Facebook, and sometimes it's very frustrating because they'll fight to the death to prove how free they are when they go and pay their taxes and buy products that there's taxation levels in there, and they may not even need those products. They've been conditioned to think they need them or that they need to replace them often. They'll go to a job where they're slaving away for some guy who doesn't know any more than they do necessarily. He just knew how to get promoted. Most workplaces, even the best ones I've worked in, are basically dysfunctional. You've got a lot of nursery school personalities going on there. So I started to question if these things are really necessary. Another quotation that was made famous in the movie Silence of the Lambs is, "Of each and everything, ask only, what is it? What is its nature?" That's attributed to Marcus Aurelius. That's a really good one too, because once you figure out what the nature of something is, like in my case with those red lights, the nature is people or cameras are going to watch you, and there's a good chance you're going to get caught. And if you get caught, the cost is too great to run away, and if you don't run away, you're going to have to pay. And if you don't pay, then your license gets taken away, and they're looking for you for that reason. And you just don't want to get in that kind of complicated area of life. So if you're looking at things as they are, and you understand what something is, like in my case, as I brought up earlier, politics being silly and fake, then how do you apply Gandhi's motto, let's call it, to that? And that's what I'm working on, because I believe, and I've met some people that have changed themselves in such a way that to varying degrees these things don't affect them. We're supposed to be all scared now. It's January of 2011. We're supposed to be all scared and upset about some uprising in Egypt that might even be artificial. There's a lot of evidence that people from America have gone there and stirred up the crowd and tried to get them to go in a certain direction. The guy who seems the heir apparent in Egypt is handpicked. He's part of the UN and some of these other in-groups. So why should I be affected by this, even if it was real? What's it going to do to my life here? Well, it could affect me perhaps in some economic ways, but the main way is political, and the main way it affects you politically is if you follow politics. If you believe that there's a Republican way and a Democrat way, and that these are vastly different, and that one will harm you and the other will benefit you, and that certain things can be just dispensed by government and there's no cost or side effect to that. Well, I don't believe any of those things, so why should I get mired in all of that? And that's the question I kind of want to leave you with. Why do we have to become invested in something just because it's put in front of us? We can see that other countries, let's take the USSR for instance, or if you want to take China, the way those places are reported to us anyway, those are things we wouldn't want to be involved in, and we question and scratch our heads and say, why would somebody follow such a dictator? And then we chuckle and turn on the TV and listen to Dan Blabber or Tom Brokejaw or Repeater Jennings or one of these people. I guess now it's Cryan Sawyer. I make up names for these people because they're so silly. And they try to convince you that this or that is the correct thing, and you're supposed to be scared about something. And the only way to not be terrified of it is to turn to the government and give them more money and more power, and stay tuned to the news for the commercials, and you'll get all the answers. So if we're not going to accept those things, and if you watched it this far, then you possibly are open to some of my ideas. What do we do to, in effect, take the red pill from the movie The Matrix and start opening our eyes to the way things really are and dealing with them the way they really are? It's one of the things I really liked about The Matrix, because even though The Matrix wasn't real, it could kill you. And it's the same thing here. If you buck the system too much, they'll come to lock you up. And if you don't let them lock you up, they'll kill you. Look at what happened in Waco in I think it was 1995, somewhere in that area. That was pretty scary. And what did those people really do? I mean, they kept making up new stories about what was probably going on in there, but none of it meant that they should be run over with tanks and set on fire. So we don't want to end up like that. I mean, I've got to know a couple of the survivors of Waco, the Branch Davidian survivors, and they're really nice, mild-mannered people, gentle people, loving people, God-fearing people. They didn't deserve to be put through all that. So we don't want to end up like that either. So the question for today is, how can I look at life, take the red pill, look at it as it really is, realize I'm being conned and stolen from? How can I react to that and still have a good life? What can I do? And to me, it's part of the philosophy of floating above, which I'll explain quickly. The way I came across this, I started thinking what I want to be is the little cork floating on top of the sea. The only problem I saw with that is you're still going up and down with the waves. And maybe I don't want to go up and down with the waves. You know, if you consider them economic waves, political waves, however you want to look at them, waves of violence, I don't want to go up and down with these. Well, what's the alternative? Well, I want to be above those. Why look at life as being two-dimensional, like the surface of the sea, when it's really 3 or 4 or 5, we don't know how many dimensions there are, but there are at least 3. And if we take to the 3rd dimension, we can look down on the sea. And if we go up high enough, we can even see patterns, maybe see land, maybe see ice and snow, see other surfaces that might be more interesting to us. Now that's all a metaphor, you probably figured that out, but basically I'm talking about floating above. We're only presented with 2 dimensions. And it's actually a little more than that, because you can sink below the 2 dimensions, I guess. If you still use the sea as the metaphor, you could sink below them, but I'm saying why not rise above them? And if you do rise above, like let's say a seagull or an albatross would rise above the sea, you can look around and you can go with the wind or not. You can land somewhere else, and you kind of get more of a choice in life. So that's what the thought I'd like to leave you with for now. And let's ponder that and see where it might take us. So thanks for listening. So until the next video, good night.